Okay, so this week another short Agadata from Sota. Once we come back, I want to do some from Baba Basra. I have been working on doing Bashert well. I spent like 3-4 days just researching and then lost the sources I made, so I have to rewrite that source sheet. What? I mean, it's a great sugya. The basics, I know what I want to talk about. The question is how much I want to flesh it out. But I know there's a request to talk about Bashert, which is on that first daf of Sota. Where's Adam? Oh, I also found that the Pnei Moshe has a parenthetical essay at the end of his Perush and the Yerushalmi and Yevamot, dealing with the question you asked me about the order of Bavli versus Yerushalmi. So maybe we'll deal with that in one Agadata this year, because I found it, because I happened to notice it, but it's a whole essay. So because of you, I was looking for it when I finished Yevamot Yerushalmi. So maybe I'll do that at some point, because you requested it. Yes, it's been 8 months. I'm like 70% done. Yeah. It's been a crazy few months, man. Okay? Yes, I will finish it this year at some point. I will make a Siyam in Yerushalmi. I hope you'll all be there. Okay, good. But Bintayim, this is another short Agadata from Sota. Like I said, I'll be switching back and forth Sota Baba Basra, because both of them are just so wonderfully rich in Agadata. But this is a very short one. Which I gave in Toronto on Shavuos once, but I was a bit rushed, and it was Shavuos like that between that slot that no one wants to listen to Torah. They're dragging out Mariv late to wait for Tzeis, so you got like half an hour between Mincha and Mariv on Shavuos night, and in Toronto it's really bad because it's like 10:30 at night. So I wanted to give it once, not rushed, so I get to give it now. Okay. So this is 2 lines on Sota Daf Chavbet Amud Aleph. And because I'm nice, I left the English that I'd put on when I gave it in Toronto. Okay? Yeah, I know. Sometimes I'm nice, and then you remember that I'm not usually nice to yeshiva guys, right? To other people I'm nice. To you guys, no. But fine. So the Gemara says, Tana, Hatanaim Mivalei Olam. The Tanaim. Now, Tana we use to mean the people who wrote the Mishnah. That's not technically right. Really, it's the Tkufa of the Tanaim, the time period of the Tanaim. But the Tanaim, in a formal sense, in the Gemara, are the people who weren't necessarily good at lumdus, at analysis. They had a really good memory, and they would just repeat the Mishnah over and over by heart. And the rabbis would, right? Yes, would say the Mishnah so I can analyze it. Right? They were the source sheets, essentially, right? Those were the Tanaim. So in the Gemara, when you see Tani Tana Kamei De, that someone taught the Mishnah in front of, that's what they're talking about. They're not the rabbi. They're not the person analyzing. They're the person simply reciting the words of the text by heart, and other people are analyzing it, right? So the Gemara says that the Tanaim, those people who cite the Mishnah, Brisa, Midrash by heart, by rote, destroy the world, erode the world. So the Gemara says, Mivalei Olam Zalkadaitach. Yeah, basically Rami's reaction. Really? The people who just recite Mishnah by heart, that's the worst you could think of? Those are the people who destroy the world? I can think of a lot of people that go into the list, but that's, the people who only know to say Mishnah by heart, that's the great crime. So, Amar Ravina, no. If they say the Mishnah, that's great. We want people who know Mishnah by heart. Shemorin halacha mitoch mishnatan. If the people who paskin decide halacha based on the Mishnah, that's bad.
Based on the style Mishnah explained before.
Yeah, exactly.
Hold up. What was that? What was that one rabbi's name? The one with the story that they was getting by a wall and the angels were jumping down the wall. What was the other rabbi?
The rabbis or Yochanan?
Yeah, and then it was
Ilfa.
Didn't he literally say I can do that from any Mishnah and test me on it? And they did.
So it's saying if you paskin based on that, the Gemara says paskin based on Mishnah, that's bad.
So it's saying if everyone would.
No. Anyone who would paskin straight by a Mishnah, that would be bad. Tani nami hachim. We have a brisa that says the same thing. Amar Rabbi Yeshua. V'chim v'alei olam. Really, you think people who learn Mishnah are destroyers of worlds? V'alo miyashvei olam hein. Isn't that aren't they good people? We want more people who learn Mishnah. I mean, maybe they don't know Gemara, but like halavai, the worst you can say about someone is that he knows Mishnah by heart, right? That should be the biggest insult. So the Gemara says, Shemar lichad olam lo. So elo shemorin alacha mitoch mishnatan. So here's the very simple question I want to deal with. What is so bad about paskening? What is the Gemara telling you when it says it's really bad to pasken from a Mishnah? What's so bad? Right? It's not just bad. It's mevale olam. Right? This is yeah.
It's like this new deal with two pasking from the Torah. We got what is in the Torah that actually explained it literally.
So tell me more. I mean, what's your problem?
They didn't actually care to explain what it meant. They just took it off.
Good. So Andrew basically says, here's the problem. If you paskin from the Mishnah without analysis, you will get it wrong. And wrong is bad. Right? Wrong is bad. Really? Paskening badly is pretty bad. Paskening wrong is bad.
Those are the worst people in the world.
I didn't say the worst. They just erode the world. They're not the worst, they're just bad. Bad. They're pretty bad. Right? Bad. Yes, Ezra.
So this comes from a Braita. When people...
The supporting statement comes from a Braita, correct.
The supporting statement.
Meaning first it's introduced without a Braita. Well, no, you're right. They're both prices. They're two prices. Yes, correct.
So, how could it be... What is the worst... It's like Mishnah or the king, right? Aren't they both...
It doesn't say from a Mishnah. It's Tanaitic material.
What?
A Tana is someone who repeats Tanaitic material by heart.
Opposed to what else? Like, what else should they be poskening on? Because it's not like the Gemara existed when they're talking about.
You're right. Good, but what is there?
Nothing.
No, that's not true. Very good. There's the understanding of it.
Or was it just not really understanding of what? Like,
of that material.
But isn't that by definition Talmudic material? Because it's not like, because back then everything was oral, right? Nothing was written down. So it's not like they're saying,
very good.
Oh, I know this.
Very good. But was everything, what was in the Mishnah the totality of what people knew about said material?
What? No.
Was the truncated, summarized versions of the halachot as found in the Mishnah the totality of Torah in the Tanaitic period?
No, but the Mishnah wasn't.
No. That's it. The answer is no. So what? But we'll see. Is that Rashi's going to say essentially what Andrew said, and he's going to answer your question. He's going to say the problem here is that we're worried about you getting it wrong. How are you going to get it wrong? To answer Ezra's question, because you're right. The only text that was around was the Mishnah. So what does it mean for Rashi? 1 second. So what does it mean to paskin based on the Mishnah for Rashi? It means to paskin without analysis. Right? Meaning, you're right. The Tanaitic material existed in summarized form, but there was tradition that went along with it. You had to understand it. There are techniques to understanding it. Yes, Ezra.
But with the Braitas are just Mishnahs that didn't make it into Mishnah Preceptor, right?
Okay.
Or it's quotes from rabbis or whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
So. If it's a Braita, doesn't that mean that whatever they're talking about wasn't in, like the Mishnah didn't exist whenever the statement was made?
No.
Why? Because
what do you mean didn't? What do you mean didn't exist? Didn't exist as a formalized body of text or as a tradition?
Well, I mean, as a tradition.
We paskin like brises all the time. Just because Rabbi Yehuda Nasi didn't put it in the Mishnah doesn't mean it's not a relevant halachic material.
Right, but there was no difference between what made it into the Mishnah and what didn't make it.
Correct, and even afterwards there isn't. The Gemara paskins like brises against Mishnahs, not so infrequently.
So why would before there was a distinction between?
Because so look.
Mishnah, why would they be talking about how bad it is to ignore analysis on the Mishnah when there is no analysis on the Mishnah?
That's not true. Just because there's not a formalized tradition that has been codified doesn't mean people didn't have techniques of analyzing it.
But what is the difference? What is the difference?
Let me read Rashi. Let me read him. Look at Rashi. Mivalin olam. What does it mean they erode the world? Why? Bihoraot ta'ut. because they make mistakes. Why? The chevan de enyo din ta'amei Mishnah. Because there was always understanding. You always try to summarize traditions in pithy ways. Because remember, when everything's by heart, it's important to have a somewhat short version of it. But that doesn't mean there isn't analysis that goes along with it. Right? You're right. We have codified analysis called the Bavli and the Yerushalmi. But people always had techniques of understanding. Everyone understood that the Mishnah wasn't the be-all of Torah in that period. It was just the Rashi Tevot. It was the summary versions that were memorized. So Rashi says, why do people who paskin from Mishnah, why are they bad? De'ein yodin tamei Mishnah, because they don't understand them. So pe'amin gormin shemidamin lem davar she'eino domeh. Therefore, what happens? Sometimes they'll compare things that shouldn't be compared. Va'od yesh mishnayot harbei. Second, coming to Ezra's point, there are a lot of mishnayot, meaning there's a lot of Tanaitic tradition. Damrin hamani plonihu v'chidahi. What do we do all the time in Shas? All the time we say, here's a Mishnah, here's a Brisa, they contradict. You have to know that one of them, even though a name isn't attached to it, represents a minority position. And one, without a name attached to it, happens to represent the majority position. That's not necessarily found in the Mishnah or the Braita itself. That's part of the accompanying traditions. Because no, according to Rashi, even in the Talmudic period, there were traditions attached to the Talmudic material. Furthermore, you might not paskin like a particular Mishnah or Braita. And they don't know the rules of how to paskin. Rabbi Min Yached, Rabbi Kiva, v'chaveirav, Rav v'chaver, etc. Hilgach morin haro ta'u. So Rashi says, what's the problem with paskin from Mishnah in a nutshell? Mistakes. Rashi is worried about mistakes. That's it. Yes.
So using Rashi, you're saying that destroying the world isn't actually like destroying the world, it's rather like eroding, so to say, the
Yeah, and according to, in a halachic world, if you paskin wrong and people practice wrong, that's bad for the world itself, right? Now, yes, Yonatan is correct. We're learning Agadata, so we should pay attention not just to what it's saying, but to the rhetoric here, to the literary artistry here. Clearly, the Gemara is also trying to make a point that getting halacha wrong isn't just you paskin wrong. The rhetoric here is supposed to remind you, paskining wrong is bad. Like, it affects not just halacha; it affects the world. Right? There does seem to be an underlying assumption that halacha is real. And halacha is real, so pasking wrong is bad. Yeah.
Two things. What does it mean, like, with the whole lo shamayim thing, what does it mean to get it wrong? Because whatever is decided by people becomes the objective reality. So what does it mean to get it wrong?
So that's complicated. Thank you, Ritva and Eruvin Daf Yud Gimel, but not necessarily according to everybody. You're correct. There are some Rishonim who think that. There are many Rishonim who think you're wrong. But first of all, two answers. Some Rishonim think that Elu V'Elu Divrei Elokim Chaim does not mean that there are multiple truths. It just means that anybody who's engaged in the process of truth, the Torah they come up with is valuable, right? In which case, there is a wrong answer. But the easier answer is that there may not be, even if you think there are multiple theoretical truths, that doesn't mean there are multiple procedural truths. Right? And Rashi is talking often about procedural truth. Meaning, the rabbis have decided, the Rov has decided that it's usher. This Mishnah reflects a minority position. It is procedurally wrong to follow the minority position. That doesn't mean it had to be that way, but at this point it is that way, and if you get it wrong, that's procedurally incorrect. And that's bad.
Also, if this is a statement, if this is before the Mishnah was codified, what difference is there between Tanaitic statements or whatever and Tanaitic and traditions on those? Because aren't those aren't those by definition also Tanahitic?
No. No, as I just told you, Tana, you are misunderstanding the word Tana, as I just said. Technically, Tana is the person who repeats the abbreviated form of Mishnah in front of the rabbi who's capable of analysis. Right? That is what a Tana was formally. So the Gemara is saying, if someone paskins based on the Mishnah, meaning the abridged version that the court stenographer reads back so that the judge can actually weigh in, if you paskin based on that version rather than the analysis that always existed but was not codified as a text or even as a formula, even as an oral formula, if you leave the analysis out, that's wrong.
Then why is this, Brisa?
Because even in the time of the Brisa, that's the case. Even in the time of the Tanaim, there were...
Why is a Tana necessary? How are you going to know?
A Tana is, again, not what you're thinking. The Tana is not the rabbi.
Why is a Tana necessary? If he's repeating it in front of someone who
because
the tradition, obviously they should also...
Because Rebbe wrote down the Mishnah. They existed before him.
But you said a Tana is the person who repeats...
The oral, truncated versions of the tradition.
In front of the person who knows the actual...
The person who will analyze it. Correct. That predates the Mishnah.
But shouldn't the person who already knows the actual, who knows like the between the lines text?
No, because they might not have have as good memory. Not everyone who's good at analysis has a perfect memory. You could have someone who has a photographic memory, but doesn't have such mental acuity.
But how will they remember which the majority opinion is?
They won't. That's the point. Because the other person, the way it was structured is you had the person with the perfect memory who memorized the Mishnayot, and then you had the people who were masters of analysis. And they were also masters of rules. They might not remember every Mishnah, but they know that if they have a Mishnah that says Rabbi Kiva, and they have a Mishnah that says the Chachamim, that you'll pass on the Chachamim against Rabbi Kiva. They know that rule. The person repeating the Mishnah may not know the rules, but he knows the words, the formula of the Tana. Right? Okay. Right? It's good to get into the headspace of the Tanaitic period. Right? This is how things worked. Right? Look, I'm sure you all know this, right? That it's not always the case that the person with the best memory is the smartest, right? Right? You can have people with really good memories who can tell you every detail. That doesn't mean that they're the ones that are going to come up with the chidushim, right? They can tell you where to look, right? I have friends who have memories that are not as strong as mine, who are 1,000 times as smart as I am. Right, I've been in this position where I'll be discussing a sugya. I'll know the sources better, so I'll feed them to a friend. But they're smarter than I am, and they'll analyze it much faster than I can. Right? I have one particular friend where I remember doing this once, where it was an insane experience. Where I knew the sugya really well in terms of I knew where the makarot were, and he didn't know it as well, so I was feeding it to him. But he analyzed them the first time seeing them so much faster than I did, unbelievably so much faster that I had to take 3 Advils before I went to sleep. My head actually was it was like I pulled a muscle. My head was exploding. I couldn't function. He was analyzing so fast. It was very painful. He's very, very smart. This particular friend is very, very, very smart. Anyways, so Rashi is pretty consistent on his approach, and he says it in the continuing lines of the Gemara as well, because the Gemara in the same page says, actually slightly before, Tana Rabbanan Ezuhu Am Haaretz. What is an Am Haaretz? Now there are different definitions in different places in Shas. This is one definition. So the Gemara says Achirim Orem. Achirim says, who's Achirim? Who is Achirim?
Wait, no, it says Omrim. It just means Omrim.
No. Achirim is Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir. Achirim is Rabbi Meir.
Why do they refer to him in plural?
It's because Achirim is a plural word. He's Achirim because of the debacle at the end of Horiot, where he was one of the people, right? Anyways, right, a lot of people get nicknames and they don't get called for various reasons. Some people think that he's called Achirim because he's a student of Acher, so it's like a half insult or something, right? But the word Acher... What? Yes, it is. That is the definition of ad hominem. That's very good. Thank you. So Achirim says, "Afilu korei v'shoneh v'loshimesh talmidei chachamim zeu am haaretz." Even someone who learns, right? Korei meaning he reads the written Torah. Shoneh is he's experienced in the Mishnah. V'loshimesh talmidei chachamim, but he didn't do shimesh talmidei chachamim. We'll see what that means. He's an Amaretz. And Rashi says, what does that mean? V'lo shimesh talmidei chachamim lilmod svarad haGemara b'tamei haMishnah ma'im. If someone didn't bother learning svara, learning lumdus, learning how to analyze, rashahu. He's much stronger. He is evil. Evil. Yes, that's right. People who know Chumash, who know Tanakh and Mishnah, but don't bother analyzing it. Rashi calls them a rasha. Yes. Okay.
So we jumped from Amaretz to Russia.
Other way around, actually. Russia to Amaretz. No. Yes. Very good. Yes. She'ain Torato al Borya, because his Torah isn't right accurate. Ve'ain lamodo mes. You can't learn Torah from him. Shal yidei tamim yesh chiluk be'eser v'heter b'dinei mamad l'zakar l'chayv l'tamei l'tar. Because without understanding, you'll miss nuances and you'll paskin aser mutter aser. The oram who is naked, right? And no, sorry, deceptive can mean either. And he's deceptive because people will think he's Talmud Chacham because he knows Tanakh and Mishnayos Baal Peh, but he never bothered analyzing. So people think he's a Talmud Chacham, but no, he's really a liar. He's really an Amoretz. Yeah.
So is this saying that he's a Russia because specifically he doesn't learn like a Gemara or anything, and he presents himself?
Correct. Video.
Or just because other people see him as a scholar, not so that he's...
It sounds like it's the presentation and the consequences of that presentation, right? He'll paskin, things like that.
But if he's not paskin and just doesn't learn Gemara for whatever reason...
As long as he doesn't seem to implement it, he just, he quietly knows Tanakh by heart, but he doesn't claim to be part of the rabbinic caste, right? Presumably that's not as bad, right? Okay, but Rashi's pretty consistent on this page. Rashi thinks that the standard of whether you are a good type of knowledgeable Jew or a bad type of knowledgeable Jew is, will you get it right or will you get it wrong? Right? That's it. That's what Rashi cares about. Right, wrong. Yes? Very good. But there is another perspective here, which is that of the Maharal, where he does not believe that at all. And he says in the Netiv Olam, in number 5, Ein ha-perush didvarav chlal. The interpretation is not like Rashi at all. And let's see what his proofs are. He says, first of all, he said, he's very sharp in his read of the Gemara. He says, look at the Gemara. The Gemara says, Shemorin halacha. They teach halacha from their Mishnah. So Rashi has to read that as halacha, which is wrong. But the Maharal says, what does halacha sound like? The halacha. Right? The halacha. So again, this is his diuk. You can disagree, Rashi obviously does, but I want to understand the Maharal. Maharal says, it says halacha, she emet. V'lo shayach lomar halacha shel ta'ud. What is a mistaken halacha? No. He taught halacha. V'hevi le'lomer rak shemorin ta'ud mitoch ha-mishnah. If you wanted to say mistake, so say mistake. Ava perish kamo she'amarnu. The interpretation is as follows. Ki ikar ha-Torah kasher hu moreh lacha lema'azeh v'davar zeh ra'ui sheyeh yotzei min ha-Torah asher ha-Torah hi sichlit. Says the problem isn't that you got it wrong. The problem is, even if you get it right, your responsibility to Torah goes beyond getting it right. And he says, when you paskin halacha, it should emerge from the Torah. Why? Because the Torah is sichlit, is right intellectual. V'davar zeh hu ha-Talmud shesichli. The Talmud, the analysis, is your intellectual contributions to Torah. Your psak should emerge from analysis. V'davar zeh b'vadai kiyum ha'olam shomed al Torah. I think I OCR'd it, so some of it is a little bit off. And he says, what? He says, yes. And he says, even if you get it right, Pasking from Mishnah means pasking without understanding. You might get it right. Rashi says the problem you'll get it wrong. Maharal says no, you might get it right. The problem isn't that the psak is wrong. The problem is that your mechuyavut to Torah is more than about getting it right. It's about going through the process. The process is itself valuable. And getting it right without going through the process is itself problematic. Why? He says the process is what the world relies on. Lefichach. Therefore, the people wear out the world by posking from Mishnah. Aval bedor hazeh, mayu poskim halacha mitoch Mishnah, hayezadai ke Mishnah reshed al Talmud. He said, therefore, going back to Ezra's point, he's saying it's not the Mishnah per se. He's saying in their time, the Mishnah was a stand-in for the bottom line without analysis. Nowadays, if someone poskim from the Mishnah, Ashrei v'tovlo, because nowadays, if someone's reading the Mishnah, he's reading the Mishnah, he's reading the Gemara, he's trying to understand, right? Nowadays, what's the equivalent of a Mivale Olam? Who's going to destroy the world nowadays, according to him? Very good. Very good. If someone paskins from Shulchan Aruch without understanding, or the Rambam, or the Tur, or whatever, or the English books, or Mashiach, right? Because he says, Rak shem poskim halacha mitoch hapsakim asher nitchabru lorot halacha lemaaseh. Who is the modern day posket mevale olam? Not the people who paskin from the Mishnah, the people who paskin from Shulchan Aruch, the people who paskin from the Rambam, the people who paskin from the Art Scroll Kashrus book, right? From take your pick, from Shemir Shabbos Kehilchos, I don't know, who from summaries. He says, even though those books were written as psak, and they're literally made as paskening tools. Right? They've been vetted by the biggest gedolim. Too bad. Davar ze yoter rachok min hara'ah. Varishonim. K'mo Rambam zechron levracha v'Torah zechron levracha. This is terrible. It's evil. It's worse. Avagav shkam heim chibru psakim below beirur. He said, even though the Rambam wrote a code and the Torah wrote a code, lo haya daitem rak lo wrote psak halacha asher haya olem mitoch Talmud. He said they were paskening. They were writing codes based on their understanding of the Gemara. They're allowed to do that because they were pasking based on their understanding. You're allowed to pasking based on your understanding. Aval lifsoka adam mitocha mibli she'edam me'izu makom yitzei adin. But for you to paskin based on the Rambam and you don't know where it comes from the Gemara, let's just get through it and then we'll talk. Rak hilchad of lo taima, just because the Rambam says it, that's it, right? Lo Allah daita mamachshavatam. They never thought it. The Rambam definitely did think it, but that's not the point. I don't want to get into Rambam history right now. Ve'ilu yadu amechabrim ki achiburim ahim yu gormen sheyu ozven at a Talmud legamra. If they had known that by writing codes people would stop learning Gemara, v'yu mitoch chiburim lo yimechabrim otam, they would never write it. Ki yoter ra'ui v'yoter nachon sheyaposek mitoch Talmud. It's better the paskin from the Gemara. And now let's come to Ezra's point. Another of Ezra's points. And he says, and even, right, va'af ki yesh lachosh shel yesh b'derech hamet. Even though by telling people don't rely on the Rambam and Shulchan Aruch, but paskin on the Gemara, what is more likely to happen? They'll be wrong. I'd rather them be wrong, but have engaged in the process. Even though they might paskin against the truth, Mikol makom ein lechacham rav shesechel shalom notain. The responsibility of posek isn't necessarily to get it right. It's to paskin as he sees the sugya. Again, he's taking in a position, as I said. He thinks there is one truth in heaven, but you're not bound by it. The Ritva thinks there's multiple truths in heaven. Yes, it's a machloket. Let me just finish the line. Wait a minute. If his understanding makes him make a mistake, God still loves him. Let me just summarize it and then I'll take questions. Maral. Okay, fine. So there are two very different perspectives on this Agadata. Rashi says the only thing that matters in Psak is being right. The only reason we don't want you to paskin through Mishnah is practical, is that you're unlikely to get it right. But Rashi, right, and I like this Agadata, at the beginning of the year. I was thinking about what Agarata to do, because again, it was a short one, but I like this one, because what? This Agarata really cuts to the heart of what is the point of Talmud Torah. For Rashi, the fundamental goal, the most important thing is getting it right. Usually, people who don't understand get it wrong. But the point is about getting it right. That's the point. The Maharal says no. I'd rather you get it wrong, but engage with the Torah from the primary sources, rather than be quote-unquote right, but disengage your intellect and just rely on the Rambam, the Tur, the Shulchan Aruch, whatever. Right? These are two very different visions of Talmud Torah. Right? Two very different visions about what is most important in Talmud Torah. Okay, we got Ezra's been dying, so I'll let Ezra go again, even though he's asked like 10 questions, but he's dying.
So here it says that
You haven't asked a question, you go next. Yes, don't worry. Say it again?
It says that if the authors had known the works would cause people to leave the Talmud.
Yeah, I don't think that's true. The Rambam would definitely have written it. Yeah. I said, as a Rambam history, this is wrong. Right? As a Rambam history, this is wrong. Because the Rambam clearly wanted you to leave the Gemara and Paskin like him. That's fine. Right? The Maharal's theological claim does not hang on him being right about the Rambams historically.
Do you think that the Rambam is a Russia?
What?
Would he not think that?
He would think, or that the Rambam's in Rashi's camp. That what matters is getting it right.
Okay, but that would he think that?
No, he wouldn't think the Rambam himself is a Rasha because the Rambam is in Paskin based on the Rambam. He would think you're a Rasha for Paskin based on the Rambam.
Maybe he's trying to convince people to.
Yeah, maybe Lifnei Eber. He definitely wouldn't agree. And this is the critique of the Yam Shel Shlomo, who in fact levies that exact critique against the Rambam. How dare you set up a code that encourages people to not paskin like the Gemara? That's terrible and evil.
But
Yes.
it doesn't matter because the Rambam thinks what he's doing is right. So even if the Rambam is doing it wrong, it's actually.
No, because the Rambam is encouraging people. No, it's not.
But it doesn't matter.
It's a meta machlokes. No, it's meta. The Rambam thinks.
According what's his
Yes, it's meta, and he disagrees meta. He agrees a bit.
It's
It's
the Teva person.
Maral. This is the Maral of Shlomo Luria.
Thinks that even if Rambam
Not Shlomo Luria.
people to do what is wrong.
Review Yehuda. Anyways.
According to the Rambam's Svara, it's right. So the stock, whatever that he's giving, although it may be wrong.
No, he thinks it's meta. He thinks He thinks the Rambam's local psak may be right, but you're right. Meta, he thinks the Rambam is wrong about life.
But you reach that meta conclusion by his own Svara, and therefore it's okay. Because
it's better that the Rambam came to that conclusion than that he got told by someone that he was wrong. But the Rambam,
Correct.
But the Rambam was still wrong.
Would it be better if the...
Don't get me into these paradoxes. There are all types of these fun paradoxes in Shas, right?
At the end of the day,
Yes,
the Rambam-
there are all types of fun ones. Just like in the Mishnah, it's like the Mishnah in Huriyot, right? The Mishnah in Ediot, rather. The Mishnah in Ediot says there's a machloket about why minority positions are quoted. The Chachamim say they're quoted so that in case a later Bezdin wants to paskin like the current minority, they'll be allowed to. And Rabbi Yehuda says the reason you quote minority opinions is so that lest someone in the future see the opinion, they'll know it's the rejected minority and not paskin like it. But we paskin like the Chachamim, right? So, right? Yes, this is like that meta machlokas. I agree with you. It's meta. That's fun. Very good. Yes. Okay, go.
Okay. But it seems to be clearly talking about someone who's telling over, like teaching to other people. So,
well, it's talking about psak. It's talking about psak. It's not teaching. It's psak. Those are different. Right? Psak is even more important. Right? Psak is making a decision. But yeah, okay. Would that?
So Maral would say
Maral. Different person. Different person. Different people.
Different people. Okay.
One is a Kabbalist. Is primarily a Kabbalist. One is primarily a collector of Ashkenazi Minhagim.
Okay. So is he really saying that it's better that a person go through the circuit
And get it wrong. Yes.
and paskin
Yes.
people wrong that way?
Yes.
Very interesting.
Yes. There you go. And that's why I said.
Literally say the opposite thing from one statement.
Correct. And that I said, this is a good I got it to the start of the year because this is literally a meta machlokes from two small lines of the Gemara about what is the purpose of Talmud Torah. Rashi says the most important thing is getting it right, and Maharal could have gone Ezra's direction. He could have passed like the Ritva and said there is no wrong answer because God leaves multiple answers. He actually didn't. He actually said no, there is a right answer, and it's better for you to get it wrong Right? He could have said there is no right answer. He could have been a halachic pluralist. He is not. He thinks there's a right answer and would rather you get it wrong because it's more important. God, he says...
Is there any importance to
Wait. And he actually tells you that God himself would prefer you get it wrong and engage in the process that get it right for poskening for other people. He says that. He goes out of his way to be as clear as he can about that radical thesis. And that's why I said these are two diametrically opposed views about what is most important in Torah.
Is there really a right or a wrong and it doesn't matter?
Yes. According to him, you're right. He could have said that there is no right or wrong. And that would have been a slightly different and in certain ways war. Again, he could have said. I know, I'm saying he could have said like the Ritva, there is no right answer, and that's why it's important to go through the process. He actively didn't say that. He said there is a right answer, and I don't care if you get it right. I'd rather you actually get it wrong.
There's no right answer if it doesn't matter if you get it right.
It matters. In Shamayim, God will tell you, you were wrong, but I'm glad you did what you thought was right, because that was more important than getting it right. He won't tell you, you were right because anything is open. He'll tell you you were wrong, and that's okay, because all I want from you is to engage in Torah.
You said with, earlier today with whether you hold 1 or 2 days, you should hold by what makes most sense.
He says, he actually, again, this in a certain sense is the most radical thesis you could have come up with, which is there is a right answer, and it doesn't matter, because all God wants is for you to engage in the process, and if you get it wrong...
It doesn't matter. So
what?
there's no such thing as a right answer.
No, he could have said that, but he didn't. He could have said that, but he didn't. He could have.
Philosophically, it doesn't make sense to say that there's a right answer.
Listen. Again, he could have said what you said.
What you're saying, it just doesn't make sense.
Look, it's important to analyze what he actually says. You could have said slightly differently, like the Ritva, which is, no, there is no such thing as a right answer. The right answer is whatever human beings decide, and that's why the process matters. Right? That would have been a different radical thesis, because that would have said that there is in Shamayim halachic pluralism. Maharal would rather say that there's only one right answer, and I would rather you be wrong. You're right. He didn't have to say that. You're right. There were many...
It has nothing to do with whether he had to or not. There is no definition of
right or wrong
answer.
No. That's what you're saying. You're saying is if it doesn't matter whether you get it right, then that means there is no right answer. The Maharal is putting his name on a much more radical thesis, which is there is a right answer, and I would rather you be wrong and poskin wrong, because it's more important that you engage in the process.
So it's more,
right?
So I'll say, then why does the right answer matter?
He doesn't explain that. He does not explain why it matters that there's a right answer. He just assumes that there is. Right? The Ritva assumes there is not. He assumes there is. And he still doesn't care. And that's why I said, if you want about as far apart as you could get, you have Rashi who says the only thing that matters is getting it right. And the Maharal says, I believe in a right answer, and I don't really care if you get it right. Get it wrong for all I care. Poskin wrong for all I care. But engage. Yes.
He's more satisfied with the fact
correct. Is that he actually thinks it's bad to poskin wrong, but he thinks God would prefer that you get it wrong. Yes, that according to him, the greater of two evils is getting it right, but not engaging, rather than getting it wrong. Right? That is an insanely radical thesis about what is about priorities in Talmud Torah. Okay, Rami and Yosef. Okay, Rami and Yosef, you're both exploding. Go, Rami. Very good. The problem with Zaken Mamre is that he is procedurally incorrect. Is that once the Bezdin decides, again, he's allowed to teach his halacha privately. He just can't paskin it. And that seems to be a local problem of authority of the Sanhedrin HaGadol.
I mean, he's using his own realm.
Yes, but he's not allowed to. He's allowed to think it. He's not allowed to paskin it. He's allowed to argue for his position, but once the Bezdin makes a decision, he can't. But the reason the Gemara gives Shir Yirbuk Machloket B'Yisrael, because there's another meta value, which is unified psak. But it's really, but you're right.
Which has nothing to do with objective.
But you are correct. You are correct that the two big questions we have to ask are Ezra's question, neither of which we'll get to today. Ezra's question, which is there objective truth at all? This question, this sugya, begs and the second is Rami's question, which is why are there limitations? By the way, another one of the paradoxes in Shas comes from the Zaken Mamre sugya, where there's a machloket in the Gemara, whether are you a Zaken Mamre only if the Bezdin is following Svara, and if the Bezdin is passing up Masora and you're passing up Svara, and the reason you're wrong is because Masora beats Svara, or even if you're passing up Masora and they're passing based on Svara, you're still a Zaken Mamre. So one of my teachers once pointed out, what if you have a meta machloket where the Zaken Mamre argues with the Bezdin on some local issue, but also argues on the definition of Zaken Mamre. And he thinks he's only a Zaken Mamre if he paskins based on Svara and they're pasking on Masora. But since he's pasking Masora, and they're pasking Svara, he thinks is not a Zaken Mamre, but the Sanhedrin thinks he's a Zaken Mamre. So according to his own definition, he's not allowed to back down because it's not actually Zaken Mamre, and he only has to back down if he's Zaken Mamre. L'shitasam, he's a Zaken Mamre, but according to his own shita, he's not, so he can't back down. What do you do then? Very good. Another one of the nightmare cases in Shas. Right, Clapper wrote an article on this in Beis Yitzchak many years ago, which maybe we'll have a share on it because it's one of the most fun articles ever. It's called Zaken HaMamre Ki Gibor HaMasoret. The Zaken Mamre is the hero of tradition. It's a wonderful article. It ends with this very nice line of חייבים אנחנו להתייחס לזקן המראה כאל גיבור שחי חייב על פי המסורה למסורה something like it's very poetic about yes. Anyway, Bluth, yes.
So this more less of an overlooking question, more just like a actual practical question.
Yes.
So according to Maharal,
Yes.
you have someone like the Rambam who went through and like made all these socks.
He was allowed to do that, but no one can follow it.
And then he loses memory, and he has no idea what to make of the socks. Is he no longer allowed to follow?
Presumably, yeah. It's like the Rav, right? The Rav, people would quote him from when he gave shir, on the same Masech, on the same sugya, and they would say, but last time you gave shir, you said X. And he would say, don't tell me what I said last time. I don't care what I said, right? I only care what I'm learning now, right? This was, this was the difference between the Rav and Rulachenstein. As, they said, the Rav was brilliant, but his memory was good, but not like, so he forgot things, so he would learn things differently. Rulachenstein was not like that. Rulachenstein didn't forget anything, right? So he would analyze the sugya the exact same way 50 years later, right? It's different styles, right? The Rav never wanted to learn it, you started from the beginning every time. Rav Lichtenstein started from the beginning every time and came to the exact same conclusions every single time. He was very methodical that way. The Rav was not like that at all. It was funny. They once asked Rav Lichtenstein, they're like, do you think there's a value in changing your mind? And he's very open-minded, and he's like, of course. He's like, so you've changed your mind on big things in your life? He's like, of course. Can you give an example? He couldn't give an example. He was so methodical, it just didn't happen. They asked Rav Amital, who was like very shitati, do you think you should change your mind? No. Have you ever changed your mind on anything? No. How about this? No, never happened. Right? Different personalities in life. What can you do? Yeah, Andrew. Zaken Mamre is the rebellious elder, right? The person who's roi to be a member of the Sanhedrin, paskins against the Sanhedrin, so we kill him.
What do you mean against Sanhedrin in what way?
He paskins differently than Sanhedrin.
Sanhedrin's like this.
No, he has to be someone who's of the level to be a member of the Sanhedrin, and nevertheless he goes and he paskins differently than the Sanhedrin.
On purpose to spite him, or because he thinks he's right?
Because he thinks he's right. We kill him. You kill him, death penalty. And it's a machloket in the Gemara, but we paskin that the Bezdin is not allowed to be mochel. Sanhedrin can't say you're allowed to be an iconoclast. They have to kill him. They have no choice. Even for himself. Even for himself, kill him. And we're not allowed to be mochel. We have to kill him. No. If he paskins, he's allowed to say, Andrew, he's allowed to say, I disagree, I think this is wrong, but I will, practically I'll follow them. He's allowed to do that forever. He's allowed to constantly be a thorn in their side. He just can't paskin once they've issued that ruling.
I'm sorry. Like, to what specific extent can he like to sort of continue his protest?
He can teach it to the rest of his life. He can say, "I think Sanhedrin's wrong, but practically you have to follow them. But they're wrong." He's allowed to do that.
Can he call them names?
That's a sheer for another time. Sheer for another time.
If you curse the judges, you're like,
Rami, maybe we'll do that as an Agadah shear later on. I did this. I gave a mini shear on this the day that Scalia died. The Zecher Nishmat Scalia. I gave a mini shear on the value of insulting people in the course of legal discourse. L'zecher Nishmat Scalia. It was a fun shear. I gave it in the Bayit. It was very fun. There happens to be a difference in this level between the Bavli and the Yerushalmi. The Bavli is much ruder than the Yerushalmi. Achikam Keshet pointed this out in his 1,500-page book on all the differences between Bavli and Yerushalmi. Amri b'Marava. He's insanely brilliant. So he points this out, that systematically the Bavli is ruder than the Yerushalmi and more into insults.
So why don't we do the whole Beit Hillel, Beit Shammai thing and always follow the Yerushalmi?
What?
Don't we always follow Beit Hillel?
Because apparently we're okay with rudeness. I don't know. Look, the Bavli. Look, one of my favorite tshuvot of all time. It was republished in the back of the Chavetz Chaim. It's from the Chavod Yair, where he's so bothered by this that he literally goes through every insult in Shas and tries to explain why it's not really an insult. It's really a compliment. But in so doing, he makes a list for you of all the best insults in all of Shas, right? And you go through them, and by the end, you were like, there is no way these were meant as compliments. There is no planet on which Ein Lo Moach B'Kad Kado is a compliment. Saying he has no brain in his skull. That's not a compliment. It's just not. It's just not. What? It's just not. It's just not a compliment. Yeah. Look, I'll be honest. I like Harif people. My favorite Rishonim are the ones that just have the best insults. You know, I mentioned the Maral Bach, right? The Machlokes Mari Beirav and the Maral Bach. I can't even do it. I'll miss it if I talk about it. Remember, it's 103 pages, but so much of it is just insults. It's unbelievable. Poetic insults in rhyme. It's incredible. It's incredible. It's beautiful. It's like, I'm telling you, you understand that some of tshuva writing is just a dominance game. Is if you can show that you are just better at insulting people in like iambic pentameter, then you just win, right? Like, I'm telling you. Yes, I had a chavrusa, the same one. I had a roommate, same one who gave me a headache because he was so much smarter than me, right? Who, at some point, I edited an article for him, which was 4,500 words on like a Lamdish article on Chalos Shem Truma, like Zeraim Lamdus, in rhyme. The whole article in rhyme. It was mind-boggling.
how did you edit some of this in Berlin? That's really hard.
It was really hard. Sometimes I left some infelicity because I couldn't. I gave up. It was unbelievably brilliant. He was very smart. He's a very smart guy. Okay.
Sounds like it's going to be an awful tshuva.
What?
Sounds like a tshuva that would be like really annoying to read.
No, it's great. Great. I love them. Like certain Rishonim and Achronim are just unbelievable at insults. You know, they're just so good. So good. The Marshal, so good. So good. You know.
I mean, there's insults and then there's when I
Look, one of my favorite, the Marshal, one of his all-time best insults against the Migdalos. It's pretty bad, right? But like in the middle of the halachic sugya of Baltashches, he just says, and by the way, the Migdalos was over Baltashchet al Hadio, right? That's his psak.
Wow.
Yes. Is right. He violated Baltashchet on the ink he used. Right. That's his truth. That's his psak. His psak. Right. Or like the Ibn Ezra on his pirish on the pasuk in Kohelet on al tivahelet picha lachatir besarecha. Right. Don't let out of your mouth to cause sin to your soul. Just on the pirish on the pasuk explains that this is why Rabbi Lazar Kalir's piyutim are the worst. Because he's like, it's talking about you. Because he's like, your grammar is horrendous and your rhyme scheme is atrocious. It just goes on his parish on the pasuk. It's like, it's unbelievable. It's like, it's vicious. Yeah, I enjoy these. I collect them.
I now want to see him try to rectify everything.
It's unbelievable. Anyways, okay, good. So, fine. We have 5 minutes, so quickly. I will point out that as much as the Rambam maybe is the classic example of someone who was result-oriented, I will point out that the Rambam has moments in which he seems to agree with this. And guys who have been in my shir know that I am very insistent on this. But for all of you who think that for Lamdus it is sufficient to conceptually analyze the Gemara without understanding those very, very tedious drashot from Psukim, just know that the Rambam thinks you are not learning Gemara. Okay? Because look at the Rambam in 6. The Rambam defines what is Gemara, Talmud, for the Rambam. Chayav l'shalesh et zman limidato. Shlish b'tar shebechtav, shlish b'tar shebal peh, shlish. Right, a third you should learn Tanakh. A third you should learn right tar shebal peh, Mishnah. Ushlish. A third is Yavin v'yaskil achret davar mereshito, v'yotzi davar midavar, v'yidamel davar. Right, part of it is Talmud, which means analysis, which means comparing, drawing conclusions. But for him, part of it, which has no nafka min halach l'maisa, but for the Rambam, this is critical to Talmud, is v'yavin b'midot she'atorah nidresh b'hen. You must understand drashot, the Yud Gimel Midot, ad sheyeda heyech hu ikar hamidot, until you understand the nature of drashot, v'heyech yotzi ha'asur v'amutar v'chayotz b'hen, and how asur and mutar emerged from the Torah Shebechtav to Torah Shebal Peh. The Rambam tells you it's not enough to understand the Lamdus. You have to understand the process of Torah Shebal Peh, which includes being able to link Torah Shebechtav to Torah Shebal Peh. And if anyone tells me, but we lost the skill of drashot, they're just being lazy. Nikuda. Okay? Anyone who knows my shir, and we have not yet really done drasha-based sugya. That's not true. We spent weeks on it. Zichron Trua, right? I caused you extreme agony and pain because I want you to understand how drasha lead to halach l'maisa. Bavli Yerushalmi, yes. It was coming out of your ears. By the end, you at least understand how two groups of Chazal, those in Bavli and those in Yerushalmi, understand the psukim, right? That's important to me. Why is it important to me? Because the Rambam says that is Talmud. That is part of the process. It's not just Lamdus. I like Lamdus too, right? But understanding the totality of the process is important from Torah Shebechtav to Torah Shebal Peh to halach l'maisa. Yes?
I'm just curious. So, like, according to the Rambam, at least this third, I mean, like, one good way to do it would be to study areas of halacha that aren't actually
yes.
Applicable?
Yes.
Okay, so
yes.
You'd be very into learning this stuff.
Yeah, it's great. I love it. 2 years ago, my first year here, I gave a Shana Bet Shir on Kachim. It was great. It was fun. An intro to Kachim. I've been learning Kachim since I was 19. I love Kachim. It's great. When I was in when I was in Shana Bet, I learned Menachot, Me'ilah, and then I learned Zvachim my first year in YU, and then when I was back in the college at Yom and Psachim. I love Kachim. It's great. Briskers love Kachim. I love it.
Because no pressure to get it right.
Yeah. Yes. One third like Mishnah, like the basic text of Torah Shebal Peh, and then a third is analysis with everything that's included in analysis. Yeah, Rabbeinu Tam is a different understanding of the Gemara he's commenting on in the first parak of Kiddushin. And part of this, I think that part of this emerges from the Rambam also. The Rambam, very quickly, I have 2 minutes, so let me give you al-regal al-chat. This was one of the first shiurim I heard from Rosenzweig when I was still in Rambam. He gave a guest shiur when I was in 12th grade. Yes, as I've said before, I do hold you responsible for anything you've ever learned, ever, kolel, ever. Right? Ever. Okay? I hold you responsible. I am mean. We've been through this. I'm mean. I have high standards. Deal with it. So the Rambam has this fascinating position based on the Yerushalmi that the Raiva disagrees with, but I think it points in this direction. The Rambam is a unique halacha. If you want to give someone smicha, you're allowed to give localized smicha. Like tell him, Yosef, you're only allowed to paskin, like the guys who did this 2 years ago. I give you smicha only in mezuzah.
What do you mean 2 years ago? That
Right.
was last year.
No. Yeah, but they did it because Ariel and Mati did it. They got smicha only in mezuzah from Rav Zalman Nechemia Goldberg. But real smicha, so the Rambam says you're allowed to give smicha like that, but only if the person you give the smicha to, in theory, knows Kol Torah Kula, and you could have given him smicha on Kol Torah Kula. Well, why? So I once heard from Rosenzweig, right? And he said, because it's very simple. Smicha isn't just about knowing the details. Part of Torah, and especially smicha, who's reached that highest level, real smicha, not fake smicha, real smicha, is that they identify with the Torah, right? They have an intuition about what the Torah wants. The Torah becomes theirs. You can know a single topic really, really well, but unless you know Kol Torah Kula, at least you've been exposed to it, right? The Torah isn't yours. You don't have an intuition about Torah, because intuition about Torah doesn't just come because you know one topic well. It's because you become one with it, right? And therefore, what he argued is the Rambam thinks it's not enough to know this topic really well. You need to be the type of person who knows Kol Torah Kula. Once you know Kol Torah Kula, you can become an expert in one topic. But if you don't have a feel for the whole Torah, right, there's something lacking in your analysis because you don't have that intuitive identification with the totality of Torah. And what I think that all these things point to is this idea, it's not just enough to be able to technically get it right? There is this value to engaging the process and having a holistic understanding and engagement with Torah Shebechtav, Torah Shebal Peh. And that's what the Maharal's really getting at, is in a certain sense, he'd rather you get it wrong if you engage in that holistic fashion than technically get it right. And I think those, like I said, are two very different perspectives on Talmud Torah that are worth thinking about. The last thing I will note is, I will just note practically, that the Pitchei Tshuva contends that nowadays, paskening based on Shulchan Aruch is not that bad, because even if you pasken based on Shulchan Aruch, because there are no Sei Kelim, right, because there are commentaries, you will at least be exposed to the various possibilities in the Gemara. Maybe you don't know the whole Gemara offhand, but you'll be exposed to different interpretations, and therefore, what he's saying is that the problem of paskening from Mishnah is only texts that don't have any analysis around them. But he thinks that the problem of paskening from Shulchan Aruch is not so bad as long as you read the Nosei Kelim and at least have an idea of the various possibilities.
You would be okay with paskening from the Gemara? I pulled out my scroll and
I didn't say that. I wouldn't be pasken. I don't think someone should be doing real psak without being capable of paskening from the Gemara. That doesn't mean you don't have to engage the Rishonim and the Achronim, but to blindly follow Shulchan Aruch without understanding it, right? That's what the Maharsha claims is the problem of Mevale Olam. That's the same as paskening from Mishnah. It's paskening without engaging. The Pischei Tshuva claims that nowadays with Nosei Kelim, with commentaries, so you are actually exposed to the broader process. So maybe it's not so bad, right? That's the Pischei Tshuva, but it's part of the same thing. Okay, this is English, so you can read it yourself. But at the end, I gave you a modern view that goes in this direction. Rabbi Dr. Judah Goldberg and Shana Goldberg co-wrote an article a while ago called Balabait Centered Halachic Consultation. What? They are married. Judah is wonderful. Judah is a very serious Talmud Chacham who also did like an advanced fellowship in Penn Medical School and is learns most of the week and then does like 1 day a week at Shari Tzedek and a few weeks a year as a doctor in America, and otherwise like writes articles on Kachim and stuff. He's great. And Shana is the mashkicha ruchanit at Migdalos, and a yoetzet halacha. So they co-wrote an article, but basically. In a nutshell, the claim that I copied for you here is that they think, following essentially the Maharal type view, is that when you're paskening halacha, some people just want to pasken without explaining to the people, right, who are explaining why they're doing it. And because they think, if I don't explain why I'm doing it, people will just follow it, they won't make mistakes, they won't try to extrapolate. But their fundamental argument, I think it works very well with the Maharal, is that halachic commitment is not a zero-sum game. It's not like the only value that we have is get it right. And if I explain more and then you choose not to follow because you feel engaged in the process and you make a different decision than me, so if you think the only thing that matters is getting it right, then you should give as little information and just make sure people get it right as you see it. But if you think that there's a value to engagement in the halachic process, even for laity, right, then you're going to be willing to explain it to the laity, even if that means they might disagree with you and they might do something that you think is wrong. So I think there are real nafkaminas to these worldviews. Right? If you think the only value is getting it right, then you're going to hoard halachic process. You're going to try to just make sure people get the right answer. But if you think like the Maharal, that the value of Talmud Torah is to engage even at the cost of sometimes getting it right, then you're going to take risks as a posek to engage laity in the process, even though they might not end up doing what you want. And therefore, I think it's worth thinking about the stakes in these questions. Right? Because it really does lead to two very different views of how we engage Talmud Torah, both at the expert level, which you're all striving to be, right, and at the level of laity and how we engage, right? These are two very different perspectives that I think is worth thinking about, and I'm not going to paskin for you on meta questions. I don't even know how you would do that, but these are two different perspectives that I think emerge and are important to think about as towards the beginning of our year in yeshiva. Good, you get the last word, Ezra.
What does it mean to paskin? Because I feel like it's very practical for I haven't run all the luck of Shabbos. Does that mean until I learn everything?
Technically, formally, I think psak requires ruling on an issue that is not open and shut.
What?
Ruling on an issue that is not open and shut, that has multiple possibilities that are still live in halachic literature. That's a short definition of psak.